You've heard the expression that something is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Well, oftentimes looking for the information we need as part of our troubleshooting efforts is a lot like that. We're looking at this mass of output, maybe from a show command, and we're looking for specific information, and sometimes we have to wade through an overwhelming amount of output to find what we want. So in this video, we want to take a look at how we can use some output modifiers and some shortcuts to limit our show command output to help us find the information we're looking for a lot quicker. For example, if I do a show IP route, this particular router doesn't have that many IP routes. It's fairly easy to peruse through the IP routing table, but let's say that I was looking for a specific route and we had page after page after page of IP routes in this router's IP routing table. Let's say that I was looking for 10.1.3.0/24. Well, if I'm looking for a specific route, I could specify that route. I could say show IP route, and I could say 10.1.3.0, and it says, yes, you have an entry for that specific network. There's a route to get there. However, notice that there are several of these networks that begin with 10.1. We've got 10.1.1, 10.1.2, 10.1.3. If I wanted to see all of those networks, what if I did this? What if I said, show me everything beginning with 10.1? I could do a show IP route 10.1.0.0, but instead of seeing everything that falls underneath that specific network, I see nothing because we don't have an entry for 10.1.0.0 specifically in the IP routing table. However, I could add this on. I could say, show me longer prefixes. In other words, the route starts with 10.1.0.0, but we can have longer prefix lengths that fall within this 10.1.0.0 address space. When I do that, take a look at this. We get all of the networks in the IP routing table that begin with 10.1 without having to see all of the other networks. Sometimes we're trying to find something in the running configuration. I could do a show run, and we might go for a few pages. This is a fairly short configuration, but sometimes it's page after page after page of configuration output that we have to wade through. What if I were looking for something under the line configuration for my console line, my aux line, my VTY lines? Instead of looking through all of that output, check this out. I could do a show run, and then in the middle of a show run command, I could press the / key. That's the one on the same key as the question mark. I can do a / and type in the string I'm looking for. I could say / line, and it's going to jump me immediately to the first instance of the word line in the running config. See, it says filtering, and it jumps me to the first instance of the word line, and then it gives me the rest of the running configuration. I'm going to go over to another router now. It's got some additional interface types that can be helpful for us in some of the commands coming up. But sitting here on router BR2 now, I want to show you a command we use quite often in troubleshooting. It's show processes CPU. And there are lots and lots of processes that are going to show up here. But I want you to notice that in these header rows, we see information such as the 5-second CPU utilization, the 1-minute CPU utilization, the 5-minute CPU utilization. And let's take a look at the 5-second utilization. Notice that there are a couple of numbers here. There's 4% and 0%. What is the 0%? Well, the 0% indicates the percentage of the processor's time that's being consumed with packet switching. For example, if we're doing a debug command and the router's processor has to handle the packet forwarding decision, as opposed to using something like Cisco Express forwarding, which is going to make that forwarding decision in hardware. If we're having to use the router's processor to make those forwarding decisions, which is not efficient, that can make this number grow, and that's something for us to watch out for. But let's say that we're investigating spanning tree running on this router. Maybe we have a bridge virtual interface set up. I just sort of picked that process at random just to illustrate this for you. But let's say that I'm doing a show processes CPU, and I'm looking for spanning tree, and I press spacebar, and we get page after page after page of output. There's a lot to look through here. The great news is we could say, take the output of this command and pipe it. That's a term often used in the Unix world. It's this vertical bar on your keyboard. Let's pipe it to an output modifier. And context-sensitive help shows that we have a few of these output modifiers, and I'm going to demonstrate most of these for you, beginning with include. Let's take that massive amount of output and pipe it to this modifier which says include only lines that contain spanning tree. And we see that we have one line. So we went from multiple pages of output to just one line of output. That's fantastic. The challenge is, I'm not quite sure what all these numbers mean. We lost our header information that said this was the 5-second average and the 1 minute and the 5-minute average. How do we get all that back and still only see the process we're interested in? We can do that with output modifiers. I'm going to again say show processes CPU, and I want to include not just the line that says spanning tree. I want to include a line that begins with CPU and a line that begins with space PID. Here's how we do that. I'm going to say show processes CPU include, and the way you say that a line begins with something, the meta character you use is the caret. It's a shift 6. I'm going to include something that begins with, that's what the caret means, it begins with CPU. Now I'm going to use a Boolean operator. Without any additional spaces, I'm going to give another pipe, and I want to say I want to include anything that begins with, the caret means begins with, caret space PID for process ID. What does this say so far? It says include in the output of show processes CPU any line that begins with CPU, and that next vertical bar, this pipe symbol right here, this means or. Include anything that begins with CPU or anything that begins with space PID. I'm going to give another vertical bar. I'm going to say or it includes what we're looking for. Spanning tree. Now when I issue the command, look at this. Not only do I get information about this spanning tree process, but I get my 2 rows of header information that tells me what's going on with all these numbers showing up with spanning tree. Another really common command we use in troubleshooting is show IP interface brief. And this is going to give us a nice overview of the interfaces we have on our router. It's going to show us which ones have an IP address assigned, which ones do not have an IP address assigned. It's going to give us the layer 1 and the layer 2 status. But you might notice that several of these interfaces or sub-interfaces are unassigned. Maybe I don't want to see the unassigned interfaces in my output. I'm just looking for what's currently configured. Here's a way that we could filter that. I could say show IP interface brief, and let's pipe it to another output modifier. Let's pipe it to exclude. Remember before we said we want to include something in the output? Now I want to exclude anything that has unassigned in the output. I'm going to say exclude, I'll just do an E for short. Exclude, I'll say unassigned. Let's exclude that. And now when we look at the output, it's much more condensed. It's much more useful in some situations not to have to look around all of those interfaces that are unassigned. Let's go back to taking a look at how we can filter some of the output from the running configuration. If I'm doing a show run on this router and I'm wanting to look at the router configuration, I think I'm running OSPF on this router, and I just want to see that router OSPF configuration. Look at all the pages I'm having to scroll through to get down to the router area. Here it is, finally, router OSPF1. What if I just wanted to see that information or start looking at that information? See, I've got lots and lots of output on this router when I do a show run. I'm just going to quit out of this so I don't have to look at it anymore. But here's a way I could say, show me my running output, but begin the output where it says router OSPF. I'm going to say show run pipe to, and context sensitive help shows us that we could use the begin option. I'll do a B for short. Let's begin where we have a line that begins with router. And this is going to take me directly to the router configuration in my running config. I didn't have to go through all those extra pages of output. But notice it's showing me a lot of other stuff. It's showing me stuff after the router configuration. If I didn't want to see all of this other stuff, I could say just show me the router configuration. Because if we go back and look at this router configuration, notice that there's sort of an indentation here. We say router OSPF, and we have all of these lines that are indented a little bit under that command. Well, this makes up what Cisco IOS refers to as a section. I could look at just this section of output. This is one of my favorite output modifiers. It is my favorite output modifier, actually. We could do a show run pipe to S for section, and I'll say I just want to see the router section. I don't want to see anything before. I don't want to see anything after. And it looks like I had a couple of commands that had the word router in them. They showed up, so let me be a little bit more specific. I'll say, show me the section that begins with router. And this is going to show me just that router OSPF section that I was interested in. That's a way to really focus on exactly what you're looking for. Sometimes we might want to write the output of a show command to a file. Maybe we're sending it to Cisco Tech. Maybe we want to analyze it. Maybe we want to put it in our documentation. Sometimes we just don't want to have all of the output displayed on our screen. For example, if you do a show tech support command, this generates quite a bit of output on your screen. Oftentimes when you're working with the Cisco TAC, the Technical Assistance Center, they'll ask you to give this command and send you the output of this command. Well, how can I put this output in a file? What we could do is pipe to, let's look at our output modifiers again. I could pipe to redirect. I could send it somewhere else. I could say redirect, and we could send it to an FTP server, a TFTP server. In this case, I'm just going to put it in the flash of our router. I'll say redirect to flash, and I'll call the file tech-sup for tech support. Let's redirect that to flash. It might take a couple of seconds to complete because it is issuing quite a few show commands in the background. There's quite a bit of output being generated, but it looks like it's finally done. And if I wanted to see that output, I could use the more command. Another command from the Unix world, I could say more and then specify the file name with its location. Show me /tech-sup. And I could page through this by pressing my space bar one page at a time. You see, it does generate quite a bit of output. This is one reason we might not want to have to wade through all this on our screen. I'll press Q to get out of that. Sometimes, though, we want to write the output to a file, but we also want to see it ourselves. For example, if I'm doing a show IP interface brief command, maybe I want to see the output, but I also want to write it to a file. Well, look at this output modifier. I could use the T output modifier. Think of a T connector that you might have in plumbing, or maybe with a coaxial cable, where the connector is actually shaped like a T. Something comes in on the bottom part of the T, and it goes out in each direction at the top of the T. Well, what we're saying here is T the output, send the output to the screen as normal, and send it somewhere else. So I'm going to T it, not just to the screen, that's implied, but I also want to T it to another file in Flash that I'll call interface-brief. I see the output on screen, and it wrote it to a file. Let me prove it to you. I'll do a more flash :interface-brief, and we see the contents of this file that now lives in Flash. What if I wanted to add on to that file? I wanted to include more information than just the show IP interface brief information. Maybe I wanted to see version information in this file. I could add on, I could append to this file with another output modifier. Let's do a show version, pipe to, this time we'll do an append. Let's append to Flash interface-brief. And let's once again look at that output. We see the output from show IP interface brief, and if we scroll down toward the bottom, now we see the output from show version. We've appended, we've added on to that file that lives in Flash. And the show IP interface brief command is my favorite Cisco iOS show command, and I use it a lot, show IP interface brief. But remember, we might want to exclude the lines that say unassigned. Remember we said we could pipe that to exclude unassigned? Well, what if I wanted to give that command frequently? That's quite a bit of typing to type in that command. I could create my own command. It's an alias to this much longer command. Here's how I would do that. I could say alias exec. Now I give the command that I want to use. It's an exec level command, and I'm going to say int. That's what I want to type in as my shortcut command to give the command in the background of show IP interface brief pipe to exclude unassigned. Alias exec int. That's the command we'll give. And when I give that command, I want it to actually execute show IP interface brief pipe to exclude unassigned. Oh, and of course I need to be in global configuration mode when I give that. Excuse me. Let me hop back into global configuration mode. Now we'll issue that command. What I can do now is issue the much shorter int command, and it runs in the background show IP interface brief pipe to exclude unassigned, and we get a nice concise output. My favorite command condensed to just 3 letters. Well, that's a look at some common ways that we can filter our output and more quickly find the key troubleshooting information that we're looking for.